Okay.
You doing? How you doing?
Okay.
Should we do?
Not so.
I am.
Well, we will go ahead. We got in early because our Korean group is at another facility, actually, kind of a special meeting. Thank you for getting that door. Want to shove that door too there? Okay, thank you. I guess our Spanish brothers and sisters will be out there. But it was a little sparse without the Koreans.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're glad you're here. I guess,
Are we still in 1 John 3?
1 John chapter 3, that's where we'll take up. And that's where we were. Oh, right along about verse 11.
Oakland flags is the game.
Linda always knows exactly where we stopped, but again, the topic here is love. In fact, the caption of this paragraph in my edition of the New International Version says, "Love one another. This is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another." And we talked about that before. Love your neighbor as yourself is that which is in Leviticus. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. So that's kind of the bad example that we have. What was Cain's problem?
It was jealousy.
Okay, we're told,
God didn't accept his sacrifice, but
Yeah.
accepted Abel's.
Yeah. We kind of have to read between the lines there because Abel offered a sacrifice of his flocks and herds. Cain offered a sacrifice of fruit and the product of the ground. We must kind of suppose a command there, because later on God wanted a sacrifice that was a blood sacrifice to emphasize the seriousness of the thing. Under the law, they also had to sacrifice grain and things like that, but it must have been a command here. But regardless, Cain didn't love his brother, otherwise he wouldn't have murdered him. So I think maybe that's the point, that a lack of love can lead to some consequences that are bad. And that's what he's pointing out. Who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. And that can be a source of trouble in our own world, isn't it? If we do seek to be righteous and do righteous things, some people are going to be challenged by that. Some people are going to be resentful. Some people are quietly resentful, but other people get more outspoken, don't they? Argumentative, and sometimes go beyond that, even to the point of violence is the point. Jesus did nothing but the right thing, time after time, day after day in his life. And yet it led to resentment. People constantly challenging him, asking him questions, not sincerely, but in a desire to discredit him. And finally, that led to his crucifixion. So maybe you've experienced that too. If people know where you stand, but they start asking questions. And it's not necessarily in the spirit of inquiry, it's in the spirit of trying to get you mad or to discredit you. I've had that happen, and it's not pleasant. But anyway, lack of love. Do not be surprised, my brothers, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers. That's a good, an interesting comment. We know that we passed from death to life. We're supposed to examine ourselves. I was just thinking, we talked on Wednesday night a little bit about taking time around the Lord's Supper to examine ourselves, or to give people a little more time. And, you know, how do we do that? Dan kind of gave us a little bit more time between the Lord's Supper and the announcements so that we could sit there and think a little bit more deeply. And we're going to be trying to do that, I think. But as you look at yourself, how do you examine your life? It says, we know that we passed from death to life because we love our brothers. How do we examine our lives when we sit there at the Lord's Supper, or when we think about prayer at home, or whatever we do to examine our lives? Is that a question that we ask? Do we love our brothers? Probably the most modern versions would say our brothers and sisters, because that's clearly what he means here. Is that something we ask ourselves? Now the answer is easy, isn't it? I love everybody, because we don't have bad feelings toward anybody, right? You know, if someone needs help and asks us, we'd like to help. But is that all that it entails? Is that all that love is? It's just a kind of a warm feeling and a willingness to, if somebody asks us, you know, show me, I'm lost, point me in the right direction. Something like that. Is that all that love entails? Maybe we'll talk about that as we go along here. Anyone who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life in him. That's where Jesus kind of embellished the law. The law said, thou shalt not kill. But Jesus said, anyone who hates someone has really committed murder in his heart. Jesus emphasized that it starts in the heart. And what is our attitude? Some people are, I guess any of us, it's possible for us to be kind of nice and friendly on the outside, but on inside, we're not so loving toward others. Maybe we're resentful. Maybe we are envious. Maybe we have various attitudes. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. Well, so that's pretty serious as a definition of love. What's the world's definition of love? It's kind of a feeling, right? It either happens to you or it doesn't happen to you. You know, you love someone because they've done something for you, or because they look nice, or because they're nice to you. Is that the kind of love that John is talking about? What's his definition of love?
Lay down here mean die?
Lay down his life. Christ laid down his life.
I mean, is that
Yeah,
the only meaning? Or is there another way?
we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. How do you do that? I think-
Sometimes,
yeah.
sometimes you should, rather than, just say something nice to the other, maybe sometimes you have to actually do something and not just do some, but might be something that involves some sort of a sacrifice on your part. Maybe you have to take some time to do something to help the person, or maybe give them some money or some other kind of
Yeah,
thing that involves some sacrifice on your part.
Real love is about action,
okay,
like he's talking about,
yeah,
yeah.
it's more than just a feeling.
Right,
In fact, it's a feeling, but it's, the bottom line, what I'm getting around, I think what John is getting around to, it's a decision. Love is a decision. Love is not something that happens to you, it's something that you decide about someone else. I love that person. Who do we lay down our lives for? Probably,
Normally, I think for most people, you think of, like parents would
yeah,
give anything for their children, and hopefully someday children might be willing to sacrifice something for their parents
Yeah.
when they're, when they're older. You might be willing to sacrifice, something for someone who's been a really good friend to you.
Yeah.
But I think when we think about what Jesus did, he laid down his life for people who were ultimately going to take his.
yeah, his enemies. Yeah, that's what I thought when I thought we lay down our lives for, but sometimes we said before, we think of laying down our lives, if somebody comes in and says, I'm gonna shoot you if you're a Christian, then we lay down our life. But it's another thing to lay down your life day by day, hour by hour, year by year. That's laying down your life, and we think of that in terms of parents with children. Parents, what do you lay down your life in what way? You give up a lot of time to really serve your children. You give up time that you could have spent doing things that you wanted to do perhaps, but you're happy to do it because you love your children. You give up some things that, in a material way, you have to spend some money on your children. Yeah, you're happy to do it, but you kind of give up some things that maybe would have appealed to you. You'd want to get them through education. You give up time and effort for that. What are other ways? I mean, I'm just touching the outside of it. But that's part of it. In fact, he gives an example. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need, but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? So there's an example of a way you lay down your life. You give them some material things. Sometimes that can be a sacrifice. Something maybe you're going to use for yourself. But you see somebody in need. It's interesting that, you see somebody in need, he doesn't necessarily say, if someone asks you for help. He says, if you see it, you should do something about it. And that is a challenge, isn't it? Because in our modern world, well, we don't want to interfere in anybody's life, but how do you do that? Takes some wisdom and discretion to do it. But that's what we're called about to do, to share things, our time, our money, maybe our food, maybe our homes, lay down our lives for our brothers. So take action, like you said. Make the first move sometimes. A lot of us, well, if somebody comes to me and asks for something, yeah, I'll be generous, but it's harder to make the first move and say, it looks, brother or sister, looks like you could use some help in this area. Let me help you. Anyway.
Yeah, you do have to use discretion, because sometimes if you want to give something to somebody, they might not want to accept it, or it might hurt their feelings. You know.
Yeah.
And I know people like that.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for charity or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to be careful about how you introduce something to another person.
Takes wisdom.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's another lesson about love. If someone's trying to help you, the natural tendency is, no, I'm independent. I don't need any help. I'm a self-made man, and there's I think one aspect of love is learning how to give, and another aspect is learning how to receive. How to receive in a gracious way. And so, not that you have your hand out all the time, but if someone is seeking to do something nice for you, bless them and accept it with a good attitude.
I think of the Jacob family though, the church would, felt what they wanted to help when all the family came.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a misjudgment, because I think they were really gracious about it, but they really didn't, they weren't in need, they were fine. But we didn't understand, right?
Yeah.
Who is this?
Jacob, he was here before when his family came in December. We thought, oh, the people came from Ghana, they need a coat. But I didn't really know he was working, and anyway, he was doing fine. But so sometimes it's hard, right? Like you were saying, you don't want to insult somebody, but I mean, they took it great. But we were dumb. We didn't know that he probably had all kinds of stuff ready for him.
I had experience where, like, I mean, this is kind of common. You're on the street and you see somebody who, could look like they may be in need. They're not necessarily asking, but you're not sure.
Mm-hmm.
In my heart, I feel like maybe I should give, but then I'm like, well, I don't want to insult this person.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because they're not asking, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like you said, it's a judgment call.
Yeah, more often the people on the street, you wonder because they're asking.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, right.
You wonder. Guess it's better to err on the side of love and concern for others. Yeah, love is a decision, putting others first, I guess. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said that's the second command. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. This then is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence, whenever our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. What's he saying there? That's kind of a whenever our hearts condemn us. do we sometimes, is he saying sometimes we can judge ourselves too harshly? But God is greater than our hearts. He knows everything.
But we feel guilty because we don't think we're doing enough.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what he's getting at here. We set our hearts, whenever our hearts condemn us, if we are loving, not just with words, but with actions and in truth, we can set our hearts at rest. So, because we're gonna feel guilty. Hi, come in. We're talking about love. From 1 John chapter 3, about verse.
I don't know if this applies at all to, but Cain, so he felt hate in his heart, but he couldn't see any other option. You know, if you feel guilty, but there was a way
Yeah,
to deal with that, and before you kill someone, but he didn't see it.
Abel became kind of a constant reminder that he wasn't doing the right thing according to what God had evidently commanded. And so that's the easy way to get rid of what reminds you. Or if you feel a message makes you feel uncomfortable, get rid of the messenger. That's been the strategy throughout history, hasn't it? If something makes you feel uncomfortable, get rid of the messenger. And so missionaries have been killed and silenced in
Many prophets,
What's
prophets
it?
in the Old Testament.
Yeah,
Same thing here.
yeah,
And early Christians too.
yeah,
Jesus, they didn't like his message.
get rid of
They
the
felt
messenger.
threatened. They felt threatened by him. I don't know why, but they did.
Made him feel uncomfortable. So that, and I think that's what this person, love can make you feel uncomfortable because you wonder if you're doing what you should. But God knows our hearts and our intents. And that's why we have to examine ourselves. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask because we obey his commands and do what pleases him. That's an interesting discussion. What is it? It's really talking about prayer, isn't it? We talked about prayer this morning, and that's a great example of prayer. Give us this day our daily bread, and so on. We rely upon God. But is this suggesting that we will receive what we ask for because we obey his commands, and his command is love?
Love one another.
Yeah, yeah. If we do what he commands. Love one another. So we'll receive what we ask for, in a sense, if we're asking for the right thing, isn't it? If our hearts are right before God, if we're thinking of others, our prayers are not going to be just filled with the request for ourselves. If we're loving others, our prayers are going to be for others. And as I've said many times, a prayer, a fervent prayer, we rely upon God, but a fervent prayer causes us to think, is there something that I can do? You know, if we pray for someone a lot and continue, you think, is there something that I can do for that person? Maybe you're praying, for doctors to heal and, but is there something I can do to encourage this person? That's one of the reasons we have this Barnabas team, right? We pray for a lot of people, and a lot of the people that we are praying for, we have an opportunity to do something, just a note, an email now, or a phone call can mean a lot. And so, anyway, that's,
So I ask a question, I have a question for that though, so. And this is, I personally need help with this, so like if, okay, we're supposed to love, obviously. And then as long as our hearts are right, these verses suggest, you know, the Lord will grant what we ask because our heart's in the right place. Now, suppose we also are to love our enemies, right? So suppose we're asking for justice for a gross injustice that was done to us. Can we do that and still love? Or, because I would say yes, but how do we know? So, 'cause this can get really hairy, you know what I mean? Like, you know, we're all human, whatever, right? But I can admit, I can be honest. There have been times when, you know, folks have done me wrong, or whatever, and it would bring some sort of, I don't wanna say peace, but like, I don't even know, like, I don't wanna use peace for fulfillment, but to see that justice was done. Even if it meant they had to suffer, because of what they did.
Satisfaction.
Yeah, I didn't want to use that word, but you basically did, that's what I was thinking. So you see what I'm saying? So it's like, how do I know that I'm loving? Because it feels like, I've said to myself plenty of times, I said, maybe I hate this person. I don't know. I mean, because I pictured certain situations. I'm like, would I help them if they were like, they exalted themselves so much above me that I was not.
Yeah.
So why shouldn't the tables turn? You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
And I looked through the word, it's like, okay, well, justice is a big thing, right? I mean, David
Yes,
talks about
it
it
is.
all the time.
yes, it is.
Christ himself, you know, the widow, the unjust judge, you know, all kind of things, you know,
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
about it. It's not, you know, it's definitely valid. But then it's like you have to, so, you know, in other words, the lines get crossed for me sometimes, like, am I
What do you-
loving because I want this? That's basically what I'm getting at.
What do you think?
We all want some satisfaction, and I think for the Christian, the ultimate satisfaction will be when Jesus judges everybody. And he will mete out the justice, ultimate justice.
Yeah.
So we don't want to dwell on that too much, but I think it's okay to feel some satisfaction if justice is achieved, but you just don't want to be vindictive and hateful, you know, so there's a line there, it's a kind of a fine line.
Yeah.
Just don't be hateful about it.
Because you know, the scripture says like, don't mock, right? So, but even if that, you know, I don't know, it's like in my heart, I'm like, well, even if you, so if you see, let's just say you saw that person being dealt with, right? It was not in your hands, but in your head, you're like, yeah, that's what you get.
I'd like to see that
Yeah,
person
but
get
even
some
if
recompense.
you saw it, you're in your head, you're like, yeah, that's what you get. It's like, is that wrong? You know, how can that feel so right, but it be wrong? You see what I'm saying?
You wanna gloat over it.
Right.
That's where you draw the line,
that's good.
don't be a gloater. I can't see Christ gloating over anything,
No, right, you're correct.
even on the cross, you know, he could have been that way. But he said, for Father, forgive them, know what they're doing to them.
Right.
He didn't bring down the angels to wreak vengeance, he could have
Right.
called the angels down.
Right, because there's a set time for all of it, right.
He let it kind of, go through its process, you know,
Right.
and God will eventually wreak the vengeance if there's any.
Right.
It's kind of free, it's not.
We gotta be
you don't
content with
deal
it.
with the whole thing.
Yeah, it's just how do I know I'm loving still, or am I? Maybe I'm not. You know, I don't know. I mean, and I have to just deal with it and pray about it.
It's hard to do both, but it must be possible to want vengeance and not be in the wrong, because they're the martyrs under the altar that are continually
Oh,
asking
Oh,
for it.
yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like when let's say you're called to go to war, you're gonna be a soldier. And yet we're to love our enemies,
Right.
and yet you gotta carry a gun and maybe shoot the enemy.
Right.
Can a Christian still can have a loving attitude? I think they can. You can shoot an enemy, but let's say there's prisoners of war, you treat them humanely. You know?
Right.
There's a fine line there, but some Christians will say, I'm not gonna carry a gun at all, you know, I don't want to shoot, but other Christians will shoot, and then being loving to their enemy as they can, they don't shoot, but it's a difficult situation, you know.
Or, and it's the last thing, but like in Psalm 58, I think it's verse 9 and 10 or something like that, David's very descriptive about it. He's like, you know, Lord, bless me to be able to wipe my feet in the blood of my enemies. And I mean, like, I'm like, okay, if this is in the word, this is valid. David was favored, all this stuff. Then I mean, I wouldn't go that far, so it's like,
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
he knew that those were enemies of God.
right, So
And you
that's
know,
okay,
and
but-
some of these, some people who are not just and who are cruel, they're enemies of God. And we try to do what we can to prevent that from happening. You know, we have a criminal justice system that's supposed to deter is a major idea there. Again, vengeance is God's. It's up to him to recompense, and he will. But it's up to us to do what we can to prevent that from happening again by that person or another person. You know, you read in the paper, some people who, you know, maybe a family member has been murdered or something, they find a lot of satisfaction in seeing the person who did that sentenced to a long term in jail, in prison. And we can understand that. But, you know, sometimes you read about somebody who's, you know, some reckless driver has run over a kid, and you'll see the family of the child who was killed saying, you know, we want to reach out to that individual who did that and show them that we're willing to forgive. But, you know, that's, I've always thought, wow, what an example that is.
It's tough.
Right, if they can do it, you know.
Yeah, to try to reach out to the person who has wronged them.
But yeah, it's the government's responsibility, right? God set it up to
Yes,
protect us from enemies and from within and from without.
that's,
So it's okay if the government gives them a sentence, and
yeah,
I don't think we have to say,
beareth not the
that I
sword.
forgive you, it's good if you can. But that's the government's role, protect us,
Yeah,
set up by
I mean,
God.
number one is to love God and to love his word and his rules and his righteousness. And there's a lot of unrighteousness in the world. And we can hate the unrighteousness, but still pray that the person who's been disrespectful, who's persecuted, may turn their life around. I don't know.
So that's the difference, so I should wanna see that at the end, right, that's how I would know that I'm at least in the right place, right?
You can be glad that someone has been caught and has been, you know, maybe gone to jail.
But I should want them to say.
You can pray that they'll think about what they've done and somehow come to Christ.
Right,
Many people in prison do,
that's true.
they have these prison
Yeah,
ministries.
Yeah,
going all the
that's why
time.
we have ministries in prison.
And we have some in the Church of Christ.
Yeah. Read about this guy in Michigan, he has a big prison ministry.
Yes,
So,
yeah, he's always in a prison, seems like every week,
yeah,
having Bible studies.
The guy Jeffrey Dahmer was baptized
That's
through a,
good.
what, about Bible
Yeah.
correspondence or something?
Yeah.
And when they get out, they come to his church and visit, at
Yeah.
least.
Church of
Yeah.
Christ, yeah,
I don't know.
supposedly, I mean,
he was a serial
some
killer.
lady, some lady did lessons with him, I mean,
Wow.
and he got murdered, right, in jail.
Yeah,
You don't
right.
know,
It's
you
like-
don't know that person's heart, but, I don't know, I don't know if that's an answer.
No, I mean,
Just
you
some
know,
thoughts.
it was burning on my, cause I've been kind of dealing with this for a little bit.
Yeah,
I knew the weakness of mine, the topic came up, so, yeah.
Well, let your conscience be your guide, I think this, everybody's gotta deal with that in a different way. If you got a conscience trained by God, it will guide you in a situation like that. It's gonna be a lot different for everybody, it's a circumstance.
And Paul turned it around, right? I mean, look at it, and he had to live with that guilt, but you know, whatever,
Yeah.
and then move on. It's something really powerful.
Don't let it eat you up, though.
Sometimes
Situation,
that's-
It's done that, but I mean, that's, you know.
You gotta deal with it,
Yeah.
get some peace and move on. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
as Jesus said, you turn the other cheek, and sometimes that's the greatest sermon that you can preach is, showing someone that you don't have that attitude, I'm gonna get back at you. You hit me, I'm gonna hit you.
Right.
You did bad to me, I'm gonna do bad to you. And sometimes that's the greatest sermon you can preach if you don't do that.
Right.
Yeah, that'll get their attention faster than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
For God, because that's, everybody in the world, unless they have Jesus in their life, is gonna basically get tooth for tooth.
Mhm.
Kind of mentality.
But,
And I'm not vengeful myself, it's just, but you know how you get in the habit of like,
yeah,
looking for that moment where they slip on that banana peel, you know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like there, you're looking for their downfall, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, this can't be too right, you know, it feels kind of wrong.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
but sometimes it takes for them to slip on that banana peel, for them to cause them to think. You can, maybe if
Right.
there's something happens to them,
Right.
it'll cause them to think seriously about changing. But,
Thank God, I'm sorry to take up time.
it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, we don't know what's happened to you, and there others in this room have had things happen to them that nobody knows about, but
Oh, yeah. Right.
we just try to do what Jesus would have done. What would Jesus do? He was forthright. He wasn't afraid to confront somebody and say you're wrong. And but he had love.
But ultimately got him on the cross, I think.
Well,
Ultimately put him on the cross because he confronted leaders like Pilate,
Yeah.
different ones. But their moral lives and spiritual lives, they felt uncomfortable.
yeah, you
We're
wonder.
this radical.
Paul experienced all those persecutions that we read about. He was left for dead. You wonder, did he, want somebody, the people that did that to him, that whipped him? Boy, how do you love those people? You wish the guy's whipping you, oh man. You wish that would happen to him. I don't know if his heart felt that way or not.
He comes close when he talks about God striking the whitewashed wall.
Yeah. That's right. Let God deal with that. Anyway.
Yeah, that's where a lot of our peace comes from. But we have that, the world doesn't have that peace yet. Let God deal with it. They don't think that way. They don't have that relationship. They don't have that eternal perspective. They don't even believe in it. There's a heaven or hell, or a God in judgment. But we have that, so that is a great blessing, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. Like you say, war and what we see going on in the Middle East and other places at this time.
Yet there are Christians over there in the middle of that, that war.
Yeah,
There's 20,000 medical people over there right now getting polio vaccinations, and they're shooting and bombing going on all around them.
Yeah.
Wow, that's real commitment. That's a testimony that there's some good in the world. Yeah.
we're verse 22, 23. And this is his command, to believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us. Those who obey his commands live in him, and he in them. And this is how we know that he lives in us. We know it by the Spirit he gives us. And we've talked about that before. What is that Spirit? The Holy Spirit that dwells within us. And that's one of the things that the Spirit does. It testifies with our spirit that we are the children of God. In other words, when we're doing the right thing, but that our conscience can say, this is not quite right. You need to make some changes. The Spirit helps us to put to death the deeds of the flesh and not to do them. And we know that deeds start in the heart. So that makes us feel uncomfortable sometimes. And it makes us think seriously about loving. That sometimes the Spirit, raises questions. Are you doing as much as you can? Are you really doing the right thing? Is your attitude really right? That's the Spirit working sometimes through the Word, sometimes through a sermon or whatever. Anyway, test the spirits. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. What are these spirits? Test the spirits.
Like, there are evil spirits.
There's evil spirits, yeah. There's good, the Holy Spirit, but then there are evil spirits. Who's in charge of this world? Satan is really the prince of this world. Satan is behind all of these injustices. Satan is behind it. He's tempting people, and people are giving in to that. So, how do you test the Spirit? This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming, and even now is already in the world. And he's going to go on to talk about this. What he's really dealing with people at that time who didn't believe that Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah. And he's saying that's such a critical thing that's how you test teachings, spirits, that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. Is Jesus the Son of God? That's the critical question. That's, that was mentioned, Allah, somebody who says Allah, praise him, Allah. Oh, it's the same God, but is it the same God? Because those who pray to Allah don't believe that Jesus Christ is God come in the flesh. So they don't know what love is. They don't know the depth of love that the creator of the universe would send his son into the world and allow him to be nailed to a cross. That's love. And if you don't see that, then you're inclined to, well, if somebody doesn't agree with me, I'm going to make him agree with me, no matter what it takes. Or if someone doesn't agree with my point of view, we'll get rid of them. We'll kill them. And that's what a failure to understand that aspect of God leads to. And so it's not the same God. They may say this is the creator of the universe, but it's not the same God if it's not the God who sent his son in person into the world. So anyway, that's my view of it. It's not the same God. We call him this or that. But anyway, and he's going to go into some of these people felt that Jesus was a man, that the Spirit came upon him at a time, but then withdrew from him before he was put to death, because under their view of it, God could not be put to death in any way, shape, or form, so they couldn't understand that this Jesus was God and gave his life, because then a God would be too holy to do that. So anyway, we'll run across that, but this is the spirit of Antichrist, and that leads to some bad things. Dear children are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who's in the world. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God, and whoever knows God listens to us, but whoever is not from God does not listen to us. This is how we recognize the spirit of truth and the spirit of falsehood. So we'll go on next time. But that's something to think about. Test the spirits. And if you believe that Jesus is from God, this is every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus has come in the flesh. Is what kind of an acknowledgement is that? Oh yes, I agree that Jesus came in the flesh. Is that it? An acknowledgement is going to lead to faith, is going to lead to action, is going to lead to love. So to me, it's not just what you say, and then it's what you do. So anyway, thank you for those comments and thoughts, and we probably circled
See you
around.
Yeah, right. Pray for me.
Yeah.
See you kept, we don't always know what happens,
Everyone, thank you.
but,
Yeah.
God bless you, Pam. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have to do our big screen.
It's better than there. No.
I don't know. Don't ask me that question. He said he didn't have time to do it. Do you know what happened?
No.
is this person on the way or not still at large?
It's not kind of, it's a difficult situation, because it involved like my job. This was part of it all.
What job are you doing?
I went to school.
Right here? Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Do they have mechanisms here?
To-
Help?
Yeah, but, you know,
Oh,
yes and no.
Be there.
Like, you know,
1
admin,
o'clock,
they step in.
procedures at 2,
It's a lot.
I'm gonna feel horrible, cause, you know, I
Kind of
can't.
money, or what's-
Well, it's
No,
only
it's-
liquids today,
I'm not,
Colonoscopy.
Oh,
after
boy.
a certain time.
Fun times.
Can't drink anything.
Well, one time, I was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon,
Oh, wow.
and they told me, liquids at midnight. So, I called before I started thinking about it, I thought, that's ridiculous. I drank water and stuff, and I can't stand it if I can't have stuff to drink, so anyway, so I called,
Okay,
and it said,
another challenge?
do I really have to call? With it?
Oh, that's why I'm mad, you know, there's no.
Well, no,
Got a lot of stuff there with her. Oh, my goodness.
So at 8 o'clock, I
How
got up and
much your job?
Well, this one
You're not
says.
still getting tests, right?
I
This
have.
week?
to-
No.
You already had it.
Not 20 hours.
Coming up this week?
There's been more, I mean, this is.
Always pray for him anyway, if he gets them, so.
before.
Hopefully he'll get some good results.
That's, patients in that.
If they go to the doctor, right? He's not afraid of doctors.
You know, that's what you want to do, whatever.
My father-in-law died
You're
in
messing
that.
up, I'm sorry, you're messing with that.
Right, and it's like if
Oh,
I.
good luck.
Dragging it. He died prematurely too, because he had a heart valve problem, he couldn't go over the operation. Died 10 years
I don't know
ago.
how long, you know, you have to, Dan has to.
They didn't care, maybe it's not right.
Pretty quick.
Usually, yeah, but no, there's nothing.
I've got a little valve problem too now.
We'll see, but hopefully this will be
They
the
can do a
last
procedure
one I ever have to have.
to correct it, and I won't have it done. It's necessary.
Dan, stop.
Yeah, right, I started to.
No, I don't fill up, it's just wearing hours.
Probably
Everything.
somebody else's.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe push
It does.
90%. When they're put all these
That's where there should be no
like the extension of
Yeah.
they call it a clip. And they go
Not
on
in
to
the-
the point
Same
is
school we were at?
But they do it mechanically.
Stand up.
And-
Yeah, right.
Sad.
Part in there and it doesn't leak.
Pray for
Like,
her.
yeah.
Pray for her.
I mean,
Yeah, that's
Tim,
true.
whatever you wanna call. Pray
Right.
for them.
Right. That's.
they do that procedure.
I'll do that.
You have to cut into it.
I'm ready.
Always.
I gotta run into the house,
susceptible
okay,
to
to get something I
infection
forgot.
when you do that.